Hello, and welcome to Community Voices. This is a show where we talk to Humboldt County's movers and shakers. Our guest today is Chris Rogers, Assemblyman from the 2nd Assembly District of California and Academy of the Redwoods students. And now here's your host, Paul Bressoud.
Hello, and welcome to Access Humboldt's Community Voices. I'm your host, Paul Bressoud. Today, we're speaking with Chris Rogers, our Assemblyman from the 2nd District of California, who has served in the California State Assembly since December. Chris was born and raised in Sonoma County. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of California, Santa Barbara, a Master's in Public Administration from Sonoma State, first elected to the Santa Rosa City Council in 2016, was reelected in 2020, and served as mayor from December 2020 to December 2022. That was all before running for Jim Wood's seat in the Assembly. So, welcome, Chris.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, great to have you, and we have a special show today because we have students from the Academy of the Redwoods government class that are going to be asking you questions, but I get to ask one. So before we get to the students, with as large and diverse as the 2nd District is, what are the challenges of getting to know it and represent it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's actually one that I talk with my colleagues in Sacramento about a lot. So the State Assembly has 80 Assembly members. Each district is about 500,000 people. The State Senate, the second house, has 40 members, all representing about 1 million people. And so when you start to think about how to get anything done, you have to be able to count to a majority, right? And in our district, we have one Assembly member who represents 5 counties. I represent Sonoma, Mendocino, Humboldt, Del Norte, and Trinity counties, with the same amount of staff as my colleagues that represent literally a square mile in LA for the same population. So we get one Assembly member for 5 counties. There are 27 Assembly members for LA County by itself. And so the biggest challenge isn't even our geography. And I'd say just on a personal note, instead of having 5 county supervisors or 7 county supervisors that some of my colleagues have to know, I need to know 25. I need to know the city council members. I need 5 DAs, 5 sheriffs to have those good relationships with. It's just more. But our district is big, and it's amazing, and it's beautiful, and so that makes up for it. But the biggest challenge is convincing other Assembly members who have a very narrow view on the policy that they're working on about how it's going to impact us up in Humboldt and Del Norte and Trinity counties, areas that are very different than LA or San Francisco.
I would imagine that's every Assembly member's challenge, so to speak.
It is, and I will say, and we can get into it a little bit, but when I was on the city council, I went through 4 wildfires, a pandemic, a drought, a flood, and an earthquake as a council member and as a mayor. And that experience has actually really helped me to bond with some of the LA members who are going through a similar thing now, where they hadn't thought about fire before. And that's helped build those relationships so that when I come to them and I say, hey, your bill, well-intentioned, is going to have this negative impact in rural communities that you haven't thought about, at least that has given us that opportunity to be able to advocate and to get some changes made to their bills as they're working on them.
Right on. Well, we're going to break from our usual format, and we're going to have the questions to the Assemblyman are going to be asked by the students of the Academy of Redwoods government class. And first up, Emily.
Hey, so given Humboldt County's ongoing healthcare crisis, such as closures of services like diagnostic labs and home health programs, along with threats to skilled nursing facilities, what strategies have you planned or might you put into place to stabilize rural healthcare here? And how might you address these issues that are ongoing?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Emily. It's a great question. And when we talk about rural healthcare, it's an issue not just in our district, but in all rural areas in California. So there's 2 things. I'll give you the macro. I'm a big believer in single-payer healthcare. My wife is a nurse. She comes from Scotland. She actually was born and raised in Scotland. My mother-in-law just moved back to Scotland about 2 years ago, partially because she was concerned as she retired that if she got sick, she'd go bankrupt. And that's something that impacts local communities. It also impacts where health resources are located in the state. so that for-profit healthcare systems are being put in areas with a higher population. If you had a single-payer system where it was more equitable in terms of access, just from a systemic purpose, it'd be better for our communities. At the local level, kind of getting down into the nitty-gritty, we're really concerned about the impact of cuts to Medicaid at the federal level and how that will filter down to Medi-Cal. Quite frankly, that means loss of access for people, particularly in rural areas. So we have a bill this year that we've introduced. It's AB 1460 that is designed specifically to support health clinics and hospitals, largely in rural areas, but also Planned Parenthood and the UC system. The UC system is now the second largest provider of Medi-Cal in the state because so many students or low income are coming in and that's where they get access to their care. So we have legislation specifically to support them. It's actually the #1 kill bill for the big pharma industry. We have a health committee meeting coming up this week. Our coalition is the health clinics, the hospitals, UC's, Planned Parenthood, local governments versus pharma. And we'll see if we get out of committee this week. I feel pretty optimistic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Neo.
On your campaign website, you sort the homelessness crisis as being a cause of the housing crisis. Now that you've won your position, and the campaign website is not, yeah. What are your plans to address the housing issue and, by proxy, the homelessness issue?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say homelessness is not a monolith, right? The reason that one person is homeless is not necessarily the same as another. And we do oftentimes, I think, do a disservice when we lump everybody in the same and think that the same treatments are going to get people out of homelessness. Some folks, it is a lack of access to affordable housing, a lack of access to jobs that pay a living wage in a community when they're trying to stay close to family. Sometimes it's a substance abuse issue. Sometimes it's a health crisis issue. Oftentimes, you see it's either somebody who has gotten sick and has gone into bankruptcy or somebody who's fleeing a domestic violence situation. Everybody who is homeless has a different reason to be there. And so the support services that we provide need to be tailored enough to be able to address that need. So what we are trying to do at the state level is to make sure that we push dollars down to the local level so that they can craft policies and wraparound services that work for the demographic of homelessness that exists in their community. I'm a big believer that one-size-fits-all approaches to public policy in a state as large as California is a challenge. And you heard me talk a little bit about convincing members from LA about rural county needs. That's part of that whole process, is making sure that the dollars that flow to the county of Humboldt, to the city of Eureka, that they're not so restrictive in how they need to be used that they don't actually work for the population that lives here and that we're targeting. This year's budget, and I serve on the budget committee, the governor actually proposed $0 for housing and homelessness. And part of it's a game of chicken. He knows that the legislature cares about certain priorities and that we're going to fight to be able to restore those cuts. Housing and homeless services is one of those because we know how critical it is for our local communities.
Thank you.
Sit Lolly.
Hello, good morning. I am a reporter for Redwood Review, which is the AR's newspaper. And recently, Eureka has become the second sanctuary city in Humboldt County, along with Arcata. And I was just wondering, what are the pros and cons of Eureka becoming a sanctuary
So
city?
when I was on the Santa Rosa City Council, as was mentioned, I got elected in 2016. One of the first things that we did is we took up what was called the Indivisible City Ordinance. It basically was sanctuary city status without calling it exactly that because of some of the threats from the federal government. Subsequent to that, the state of California has adopted a lot of that same language, particularly around the interactions between law enforcement and ICE. And what the courts have consistently ruled is that you cannot, as the federal government, cannot force local jurisdictions to use your resources to do something that falls within the purview of the federal government. So immigration enforcement very clearly is a federal issue. You can't force Eureka, County of Humboldt, to utilize their law enforcement capacity to do immigration enforcement. And that's what's being reaffirmed by the city in Eureka, is that they are not going to participate, that they're going to protect our communities. My personal belief, and this is bore out in data, is that our communities are safer when our immigrant population feels comfortable working with law enforcement and with our local officials. And that any of those breaches of trust make it harder to get folks to come forward when something has happened, when they've seen something, because they're worried about the consequences. Even when you think about the way that this immigration enforcement is working its way at the federal level, you see those impacts. And I'll give you a tangential example. In Sonoma County, we have what's called the Ag Pass program. Ag Passes are what's given to primarily immigrants who are working in the fields when there's a disaster. And it's the sheriff's office that gives out that pass. So to get that pass to go to work, you have to be in part of a database that the sheriff's office has oversight of with all of your information. If our sheriff's department was coordinating with ICE, nobody would sign up for that program. They'd be worried that their data was being shared and that they were going to be at risk and that their families would be at risk. So having that clear separation in a federalist system is important. Now, at the same time, the flip side of that is we can't tell the federal government that they can't come in and enforce immigration policies, but they certainly can't co-opt our resources to be able to do so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Ashley.
Good morning, Chris.
Morning.
My name's Ashley Dunlap, and currently Humboldt County has the third highest gas prices in California. And this is caused by our location as well as lack of competition. So I was wondering, as a representative, what you plan on doing to help lower gas prices in Humboldt County.
Yeah, and we actually just saw news yesterday that the Valero refinery station in Benicia is going to close as well, which has triggered quite a bit of conversation amongst assembly members and senators about what the impact of that is going to look like on gas. Some of it is out of our control, some of it is market conditions, but some of it is in our control. One of the conversations that's going to come forward later this year is as you see gas tax diminishing, which means people are driving less, that means that our roads are continuing to erode as well, because that's the primary funding source for it. And so the conversation really right now is, as people are struggling, and as we know that at some point we're going to have to transition off of the gas tax, is now the time for us to find a better way to fund our roads, and that means removing some of that tax. There's also a special blend of gasoline that California requires, differences in time of the year based on how it's going to impact with air quality and water quality. We have seen from other states that by loosening those regulations a little bit, it hasn't had a detrimental impact on air quality, but it has brought the price of gas, particularly during the summer when people are driving more and going on vacations. So that is working its way through the legislature as conversation as well. We do want to have that balance, though, between California's environmental regulations, and we all have seen pictures of LA when there were none, and the smog that was there. And then obviously the cost for folks to get to work, for people to be able to exist in their communities. And it's not lost on us that in rural communities, people drive further. So one of the proposals that folks are looking at around the gas tax is to replace it with a vehicle miles traveled kind of surcharge. So similar to how your electric vehicles now have a fee that they pay in their registration, it would look at how much people are actually using the infrastructure. It is going to be a challenge in more rural areas that have to drive further, and we have to make sure that we get it right so that it's equitable.
Thank you.
Bella.
Hi, I'm Bella Wright. I'm a freshman from the Redwood Review newspaper here at AR. You recently introduced the Cockfighting Cruelty Act. What motivated you to propose this legislation, and why should we lend our support to it?
Yeah, so the Cockfighting Cruelty Act actually looks at cockfighting and looks downstream from it. So cockfighting is illegal in every single state in the nation. And yet, if you look, in California, they did an analysis last year. In 48 counties in California, they found the farms that were producing the birds and making them more aggressive to fight. And the way that they were doing that was through cruelty. They cut off the combs and the wattles. They keep the roosters in boxes with no daylight permanently to make them more aggressive. And then they sell these game fowl for sometimes up to thousands of dollars each to be able to fight in these cockfighting rings. And we've had, just in the last 10 years, the 7 largest busts for cockfighting, all in California. It's a significant issue. And it's an issue in our district. It's an issue in Humboldt County. And one of the things that happens in Sacramento is there's kind of a collective joke that animal bills are harder for people to do, that people try to avoid them because people are really passionate about animals, and people sometimes look at it and they say, this is going to infringe on my right to have a pet. That's not what we're going for. We're going for the conditions within which the roosters are being raised to create this problem. I like to joke with people, meth is illegal. Right now it would be like saying you can make meth, but you can't use meth. That's what we're doing with cockfighting, is we're allowing people to make the roosters that fight, but then saying that cockfighting is illegal. And so we decided to take it on, not just because I personally think that it's cruel, and I raise hens and love my chickens, and no self-respecting farmer out there that is going to treat their animals so poorly. It's really game fighting that we're seeing this from. And so we decided to take it on. And I will tell you, we did not realize that the animal bill issue is a real thing. It doesn't matter the animal. We had 250 people show up in opposition in our last committee hearing, most of them for an organization saying what organization they were with, that when we looked it up later is a legitimate cockfighting organization. But 250 people showed up. The bill still got out of committee 10-1. There was one member from the Central Valley who was concerned because there were so many people from his district. But the bill continues to advance, and it's headed to the floor, and we think we're going to get this one passed.
Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Copley.
Hello, I'm Copley. I'm a junior here at AR. You recently supported a bill 263 about the Scott River, protecting it during emergencies, which I love. Super great bill. But I was wondering, here in Humboldt County with our six rivers, what do you plan on do to help with large algae blooms and lower water levels each year here in Humboldt?
Yeah, so AB 263 is a bill that we introduced at the beginning of the year. It was actually the first bill that I introduced that was in partnership with the Yurok and the Karuk tribe. And so you have the Smith and the Shasta rivers that are two of the main tributaries to the Klamath that currently have minimum flow regulations related to the drought. And the minimum flows basically say this is the absolute minimum you can have for fish to still be able to spawn and to restore that fish population. Obviously, we put a lot of effort into the Klamath River. A lot of folks have been working on it for a long time. Because it's under a drought declaration, if that declaration goes away, if we get a substantial amount of water this year, conversely, that ends up meaning there's going to be less water in the Smith and the Shasta. And with those regulations gone, we'd undo the progress that we've made over the last 3 years in restoring the fish population. So we introduced this bill. It's been one of the more interesting ones in Sacramento, again, going back to animal bills. But it has been the fishermen and the tribes on one side, farmers on the other, and we've been trying to navigate that world, but we did just get out of committee as well on that one. We know that there is not just an environmental impact to algae bloom, to restoring our fish in our rivers and our creeks, but also there's an economic value to Humboldt County as well. And when I think about the history of the North Coast, a lot of it is based on extraction, whether it was fish, whether it was trees, whether it was cannabis. That's been the primary driver. Timber, that's been the primary driver of the economy up here. And what we are being able to show is that through restorative practices, through sustainability, we also can still have an economic and an environmental driver. I was actually just out yesterday with state parks up in Del Norte County. They've been doing an analysis. Don't want to spoil it, but it's tens of millions of dollars a year that comes to the region specifically for restoration work. And that doesn't even include the multiplier effect of the people who are employed to do it, spending money in their local economies. So for me, it's an environmental issue, it's an economic issue, and it's a tribal rights issue, to be very frank. And that was actually my favorite part of the discussion in committee about 263 is I had Frankie Myers, the former vice chair of the Yurok tribe, was testifying on the bill as one of the primary folks. One of the members of the committee made the mistake of asking him, what about the water rights of the farmers in Siskiyou County? And if anybody knows Frankie, he immediately said, well, if we're going to talk about water rights, let's start talking about how tribes were excluded and weren't considered citizens when they were doling out water rights. So it opens up this very broad conversation about what sustainability, what equity, what the economics of the area look like. And so it's been a pretty fun bill to work on.
Thank you for all you've done. Thank you.
Mackenzie.
Good morning. My name is Mackenzie.
I'm also in the economic classes, most of them are. And my question is, being a representative of California, how do you listen to your constituents on issues while upholding your own personal beliefs?
Yeah. I think part of it is, when I ran for office, I was very direct with people about what my value set was. I had 8 years of having taken votes on a city council, so people are not confused if they look at where I'm at, right? I'm a strong advocate for a woman's right to choose, for health access, for addressing climate change. These are the things that I've worked on, but also housing access and homelessness issues. You can go and you can see what votes I've had. And so when people voted for me, they had a good understanding of what that value set was. And I also like to say, because I grew up on the North Coast, some of it is a little bit inherent in how we live and what our way of life has been. But I like to do community coffees and town halls very frequently just to check in with folks about how they're feeling and what they're most concerned about. We actually, 2 days ago, did one in Weaverville. We did one up in Crescent City yesterday. In about an hour, we're doing one here in Eureka as well. But it was a practice that I started when I was on the city council, where I would literally just set up lawn chairs at a farmer's market and invite people to come and have a conversation. And I would do it every single month. And I tell people all the time, community engagement isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing expectation that you have to develop with the community, that you're going to be accessible and that they're going to have opportunities to talk to you about the things that matter the most. And so then I can go back to Sacramento and I can advocate for our community for funding. I could look at the ways that policy bills are going to impact our community and bring that forward. I'll give you a really great example. We just had an issue just last week where one of my colleagues has a really well-intentioned bill around aquariums and zoos, really in the vein of trying to make sure that the conditions that the animals are living in is adequate. But the way that he was applying it and the types of certifications that he was going to require in California didn't work for what's called Safari West in our district, which is essentially a walk-through zoo with safari animals, and that takes you through, because the certification was different for that type of animals than what his experience was elsewhere in the state. And so being able to have that conversation with the folks at Safari West and being accessible to them and then taking that to Sacramento, we were able to get him to reconsider how he was doing that bill so that it wouldn't put good operators out of business just because he wasn't familiar with it. And so I think that representatives do need to regularly meet with folks to talk about the issues that they care the most about, and to make sure that they're bringing that perspective back to the discussions in Sacramento. Our typical schedule is we have committee hearings and budget hearings and floor sessions Monday through Thursday, and then we're in the districts Thursday afternoon, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to be able to take in that input. We have breaks. We're on a break right now. That's why I've been up here for the week, is we've got the full break. And then after the legislative session, those are all prime opportunities to have these types of discussions, to have those community coffees, and to make sure that folks see what you're doing on their behalf, but then also make sure that your priorities are reflective of what the needs of the community are.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You got time for one more?
Of course. Yeah.
Can I ask one more?
Please.
How much does the national politics seep into the state politics at the moment?
Yeah. So it is the number. Every time that the president tweets, it changes our day, right? And one thing that I will say is that the attorney general and the governor did a really good job last year of starting to put together legal briefs around the threats that we were hearing during the campaign. And I'll give you a great example. I mentioned my wife is an immigrant, so this one's personal to me. But when the president came in and immediately tried to end birthright citizenship, you noticed that within 24 hours, California had already sued him over that as a constitutional violation. That's because he had been saying on the campaign trail he was going to do that, and the Attorney General for California had already written the legal brief on why that was unconstitutional, to be able to immediately move to get that right restored in California and across the nation. We also don't fully understand or know yet how he's trying to mess with California. We just know that he is. And I'll give you kind of one of the things that we're the most concerned about is around eligibility requirements for Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is about $800 billion for the state of California. It's the biggest pot of money that the federal government can mess with. Even something like eliminating the Department of Education has an impact, but only about, I think, 15% of our total funding for education in California comes from the federal government. It's a hit, but we can work with that. Medi-Cal is a very different beast. If he changes the eligibility requirements for Medi-Cal, if he changes the reimbursement rates, that not only negatively impacts California, but specifically rural areas in our district. And so a lot of what we're trying to do right now is safeguarding against what we think could happen. I mentioned the data sharing issue for our immigrant communities. That's been a big one. And then part of it, too, is making sure that we don't lose our local issues in the process as we're responding to the federal government. So I've actually introduced 17 bills so far this year. All of them have statewide importance, but almost all of them are specifically because of issues in our district that we need to fix, whether they're Caltrans issues, fish issues. And so we're trying to make sure we both defend against the federal government while also not losing sight of our responsibilities in California to take care of our people as well.
You know, is that a record for somebody that's only been on the job since December to already introduce 17 bills?
I mean, everybody thinks all of their bills are the best bills in the world. I'll just tell you that right now. I have a colleague that
I hope you think that.
I have a colleague that's introduced 22 bills right off the bat. I don't know that many of them are going to make it, but we try to be judicious. But part of the benefit of having spent a year on the campaign trail, it's not just trying to convince people to vote for you, but it's also making sure that you understand the local issues. So when you get there, you can introduce things that matter for folks. And I'll give you a really good example. We have a bill that we're working on for Del Norte County that would help in Humboldt and in Mendocino as well, in Sonoma County, where when a state highway goes through the middle of a city, the speed limits are hard to set. So what state law says is that Caltrans has to do a speed assessment, and then they have to, by law, set that speed limit to the 85th percentile of what people are driving. So there are many communities that are worried about doing the speed assessment because they're actually afraid that Caltrans will be forced to increase the speed limit in areas where the conditions aren't great. So we are working with Del Norte County because specifically they have areas where the road is windy and you have a lot of tourists who park because they have beautiful forests and natural resources that they want to see, park on the side of the road and walk across the street, and people go flying through there and they don't know the conditions, but they don't want to do a speed assessment because they're worried people drive so fast that it'll force the speed limit higher. What our bill says is that Caltrans doesn't have to, if they do a speed assessment, they're not required to increase the speed, and also that they can look at the actual real world conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists along the roadway and actually go a little bit below that to make the road safer.
With our district is so different than the rest of California. Do you have to explain things to your other colleagues when you have something that specific?
I had to explain to my colleagues what Bigfoot was.
Well, wait a second. You got to tell us about that because you introduced a bill about Bigfoot, didn't you?
If you all have a minute.
Yes.
So it started as a joke in Sacramento because you take office in December. The bill introduction deadline is in February. You often get what are called spot bills or placeholder bills. That you introduce it, you grab a number, and then you have a couple of months to finish the language for what the bill is going to be or the policy is going to be before you amend the bill and the spot bill disappears, right? And most assembly members, they introduce spot bills that say it's the intent to do X, Y, or Z. They're very simple bills. We decided to be funny because of our district, and we introduced a bill to make Bigfoot the official state cryptid. So a state cryptid is something that is believed by many to exist but has never been scientifically proven. And we thought it'd be really funny because then if we amended the bill and it disappeared, we could just tell people, well, you know, Bigfoot's elusive. Our district's been dealing with this for a long time, right? And it also has a tourism aspect with Willow Creek. And so we thought it'd be really funny. And then Stephen Colbert did a segment on the Bigfoot bill on his show. And we started receiving comments from people across the nation wanting to come and testify about Bigfoot. We got assigned to the tourism committee for the bill to be heard. And the whole time our office is talking about, okay, what the heck do we do with this bill now? Because it was supposed to be a joke, but it's like when you have an inside joke with your friends and it leaks out, and then that joke is no longer funny to people who weren't part of the joke. So we're like, okay, we're going to do the bill. At this point, there's so much interest, we're just going to do the bill. We're going to make Bigfoot the official state cryptid. So we get set for committee, and the day before committee, the chair comes up to me. He's from San Diego. He says, well, you know, By the way, we grabbed AB 666 as the bill number to just further the joke. And so you can't have a bill on consent if it gets any opposition. Because it was AB 666, we had some fundamentalist religious groups that opposed to the bill. So it couldn't go on consent. So the chair walks up to me and says, well, so we have to hear this bill because it has opposition. But he's from San Diego. He was hearing from his people, but I want El Chupacabra to be the official state cryptid, not Bigfoot. And so the bill died in committee. The chair killed the bill in kind of this very funny way. And so, we had fun with it. I accused him of being in the pocket of the big El Chupacabra lobby, and we had fun with it. But it was this moment of levity at a time where there's a lot of really serious policy that we're working on that we could just have fun for a minute. But yeah, many of my colleagues walked up to me and they said, I don't understand the Bigfoot bill. I had to explain to them Willow Creek was the official first sighting of Bigfoot, and it's where the term Bigfoot was coined, was in our local papers, and because many of them, they only knew Harry and the Hendersons, which took place, I think, in Washington, so they thought it was from Washington. But yeah, it's.
Did you get to meet Stephen Colbert? Talk to him?
I did not. No, I did not. But we did have folks from the Bigfoot community reach out, come by our office, and so that was a fun byproduct of it.
There you go, the Bigfoot community. That's about all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank my guest, Assemblyman Chris Rogers, and our special guests, the members of Andrew Freeman's government class from the Academy of the Redwoods. Thanks for being here, and thanks for watching. I'm your host, Paul Bressoud, saying we'll see you next time on Community Voices.
Thanks for joining us on Community Voices. If you have a guest or a topic you'd like to suggest, contact us at info@accesshumboldt.net. Access Humboldt, local voices through community media.